Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. Fast forward to the 20th century. The Romantic seed had been planted, but the school system had become more rigid, industrialized, and test-obsessed than ever. Enter A.S. Neil, a Scottish educator who decided to take Romanticism to its absolute radical limit. In 1921, he founded a school called Summerhill. Summerhill is arguably the most famous and controversial free school in the world. Neil's philosophy was simple and shocking. The child knows best. At Summerhill, lessons were optional. Read that again. Optional. If a kid wanted to play in the woods for 6 years and never step foot in a math class, that was allowed. Neil believed that you cannot force a child to learn anything. If you force them, you create resistance and hate. But if you let them be, eventually their natural curiosity will kick in. He told a famous story about a boy who came to Summerhill hating everything. For weeks, the boy just messed around. Then, one day, he saw some older kids building a radio. He watched them for a while, fascinated. He asked if he could help. They said, "Sure, but you need to know how to calculate the voltage." The boy ran to the math teacher and said, "Teach me the math for this radio." He learned in 3 days what would have taken 3 years of forced lessons. Why? Because he wanted it. It came from inside him. Neil was also deeply focused on the emotional health of the child. He was influenced by psychology and believed that most bad behavior was just a result of repression and unhappiness. A happy child, he argued, is never a bad child. If a kid was acting out, Neil didn't punish him. He gave him more freedom, more love. Critics called Summerhill a madhouse. They said it would produce illiterate savages. But the graduates of Summerhill didn't turn into monsters. They turned into artists, engineers, nurses, and happy, well-adjusted people. They might have learned to read a little later than their peers, but they learned to read because they wanted to read, not because they were afraid of getting an F. One of the defining features of Romanticism in education is the elevation of art and imagination. In a utilitarian, useful education system, art is always the first thing to get cut. We look at the budget and say, well, we need more math and reading intervention, so let's cut the drama program. Let's cut the painting class. That's just fluff. The romantic educator looks at this and screams in horror. To a romantic, imagination is not fluff. Imagination is the supreme human faculty. It is the ability to see the world not just as it is, but as it could be. It is the root of empathy, imagining how someone else feels, and the root of innovation, imagining a solution that doesn't exist yet. So where is Romanticism today? We are currently living in an era that is very hostile to romantic ideas. The dominant trend in American education over the last 30 years has been standardization. Laws like No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top are built on a factory model. They assume that education is about data. We test the kids, we measure the learning loss, we analyze the metrics, and we try to make sure every 4th grader in the country knows exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. In this environment, Romanticism feels like a rebellion. You see it in the homeschooling movement. Many parents pull their kids out of school not for religious reasons, but for romantic ones. They see their kids losing their spark. They see the stress, the anxiety, and the boredom in their 6-year-old's eyes, and they say, no, I want them to climb trees. I want them to read books they love, not books they are assigned. The Romantic poet William Wordsworth famously wrote, "The child is father of the man." He meant that the child's fresh, wonder-filled view of the world is actually superior to the adult's jaded, cynical view. The adult sees a tree and thinks lumber or shade. The child sees a tree and thinks castle, monster, or friend. Romantic education tries to preserve that poetic way of seeing the world. This is why you see so much emphasis on storytelling, myth, music, and drama in schools influenced by this tradition, like Waldorf schools. They aren't just trying to teach kids how to draw a horse, they are trying to keep the child's soul alive. They believe that a society without imagination is a dead, robotic society. You see it in the whole child movement. This is the push in public schools to stop obsessing over test scores and start caring about mental health, social-emotional learning, and play. When a teacher fights for a longer recess, that is a romantic act. When a principal decides to plant a school garden instead of buying more test prep software, that is a romantic act. You even see it in the tech world's obsession with Montessori. It is no accident that the founders of Google and Amazon went to Montessori schools. Even though Maria Montessori was a scientist, her method is deeply romantic in its respect for the child's autonomy. She believed in following the child. She didn't force them into rows. She gave them freedom within limits. The tech world loves this because it produces self-starters and creative thinkers, exactly the kind of authentic individuals Rousseau dreamed of. Now, we have to be honest. As much as this philosophy pulls at our heartstrings, it has faced legitimate and heavy criticism. The biggest criticism is that it is anti-intellectual. Critics argue that Romanticism underestimates the value of hard, boring work. Learning to read is hard. Learning calculus is hard. It isn't always natural, and it isn't always fun. If you only let a child do what they want, they might never push themselves through the uncomfortable struggle of mastering a difficult skill. Critics say that romantic education produces kids who are happy and creative, but who lack the discipline and knowledge to actually change the world. The second criticism is the Lord of the Flies argument. Romantics believe children are naturally good, but anyone who has supervised a middle school cafeteria might disagree. Critics argue that children can also be naturally cruel, selfish, and hierarchical. If the teacher steps back and just lets nature take its course, the result isn't always a harmonious garden. Sometimes it's a bullying nightmare. They argue that children need strong adult authority to learn right from wrong. The third criticism is about privilege. Rousseau's Emile was a rich kid with a private tutor. Summerhill is a private boarding school. It is easy to talk about natural learning and freedom when you have a safety net of wealth. But for poor children, education is a lifeline. They don't have the luxury of spending 12 years finding themselves. They need concrete skills to get a job and survive. Critics argue that Romanticism is a luxury for the elite, a way for rich parents to feel good about their special snowflakes, while leaving disadvantaged kids without the structure they need to catch up. Despite these criticisms, Romanticism remains the most vital and necessary counterweight in education. Without the romantic voice, schools become soul-crushing machines. Without the reminder that the child is a living spirit, we reduce them to data points on a spreadsheet. The best educators, even if they work in strict public schools, usually have a little bit of the romantic in them. They are the ones who sneak in a poetry reading on a rainy Tuesday. They are the ones who throw out the lesson plan when a bird flies into the window and turns it into a biology lesson. They are the ones who look at a troublemaker and don't see a bad kid, but a frustrated energy that just needs the right outlet. Romanticism asks us to be brave. It asks us to trust the child. It asks us to remember that the goal of life is not just to be an employee, but to be a person, to feel deeply, to see beauty, and to remain curious. In a world that is increasingly digital, automated, and standardized, the romantic message is more important than ever. It reminds us that we are not software to be programmed. We are gardens to be tended. And if we can just give our children enough sunlight, enough water, and enough protection from the weeds, they will grow into something far more beautiful than anything we could have planned for them.